Her ex was 5 steps away when the elevator doors slid open. She dove inside without looking. The man already standing there didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't move, until he stepped between her and the doors and made her ex stop cold. She thought she'd escaped danger. She had no idea she'd just met something far worse. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. All right, let's get back into it. The marble floor of the Belmont Royale lobby was so polished, Eva could see the chandelier crystals reflected in it, fragmented and sharp like broken glass. Her tan leather bag hung from her shoulder, the weight of it pulling at the delicate fabric of her dress. She clutched it tighter, focusing on the pressure against her ribs, anything to distract from the knot tightening in her stomach. She'd been at the charity gala upstairs for less than an hour. A last-minute invitation from a client who needed her event planning expertise on display. The kind of networking opportunity she couldn't refuse, even though every instinct had screamed at her to stay home. Now, leaving early with a headache she'd manufactured as an excuse. All she wanted was to reach the lobby, call a car, and disappear into the cold December night. The lobby stretched before her like an impossible distance, all dark wood paneling and golden sconces that made everything feel too warm, too close. The air smelled like leather and something floral, expensive and suffocating. Her heels clicked against that perfect floor, each step announcing her presence, marking her as visible when all she wanted was to be invisible. She kept her head down, counting the distance. 40 feet to the elevators. Then she could escape to the street level, slip into a cab, and return to the small, safe world she'd built. 40 feet. She could survive that. Eva. The sound of her name stopped her heart. That voice, smooth once, persuasive once. Now just a trigger she'd spent 8 months learning to forget. She didn't look back. Maybe if she kept walking, he'd think he was mistaken. Maybe reality would bend just this once in her favor. Maybe the man she'd spent 2 years rebuilding herself away from would simply let her go. Eva, wait. I know you heard me. Footsteps behind her now, fast and deliberate. Her breath caught as she gripped her bag tighter and walked faster, the flowing skirt of her dress swishing around her legs. 20 feet to the elevators, just 20 more feet. The brass elevator doors gleamed ahead like a finish line. Don't you dare walk away from me. His hand closed around her upper arm, yanking her backward hard enough that she stumbled in her heels. Paul stood exactly as she remembered him. Sandy hair, perfectly styled. Blue eyes that had once looked warm but now just looked entitled. He wore a black suit she'd never seen before. Probably bought for tonight's gala. Probably paid for by his parents since he'd never managed to keep a job longer than 6 months. The familiar scent of his cologne, too strong, too sweet, made bile rise in her throat. I need to go, she said, proud that her voice didn't crack completely. Let me go, Paul. Let you go? His laugh was ugly, loud enough that 2 women in evening gowns near the concierge desk turned to look. Like you let me have any say when you abandoned everything we built? When you threw away 2 years? Because you were uncomfortable? His fingers dug into her arm through the delicate fabric. The lobby kept moving around them, guests in formal wear crossing to the restaurant, a bellhop wheeling luggage, but no one stopped. No one ever stopped. You don't get to run from me, Eva. His voice dropped, intimate and vicious. Not after what you did. Not after you made me look like a fool in front of everyone. The elevator chimed behind her. Doors opening. Some desperate, primal part of her brain made the decision before she could think. She ran, tore her arm from his grip and lunged forward, her heels nearly catching on her skirt as she threw herself between the closing brass doors. She stumbled into the elevator car, gasping, her vision blurring with panic, and collided with a man already inside. He didn't stumble, didn't react, just stood there in the center of the elevator like a fixed point, dressed in a black suit with a crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie. His dark hair was slicked back, his eyes unreadable, his expression calm in a way that didn't match the chaos she'd just dragged into his space. He looked at her for exactly 1 second, not startled, not concerned, assessing. Then his gaze shifted past her to the lobby, to Paul charging toward the elevator with fury twisting his features. And something changed in the man's posture. Not alarm. Something colder, more deliberate. He stepped forward between Eva and the doors and pressed a button on the panel with one hand. The brass doors began to slide shut. Eva! Paul's voice cracked with rage as he reached the elevator. You can't just... The man in the black suit didn't speak, didn't move, simply stood in the threshold, his body blocking the doors from closing completely. and looked at Paul with the kind of stillness that made the air feel heavy. Paul stopped. Actually stopped, 3 feet from the elevator, his hand half raised. For the first time in 2 years, Eva saw something unfamiliar cross his face. Uncertainty. The man in black tilted his head slightly, barely a movement, and Paul took a step back. Then the doors closed. The world went silent except for Eva's ragged breathing and the mechanical hum of the elevator beginning to ascend. She pressed herself against the back wall, one hand steadying herself against the polished brass rail, her heart hammering so hard she thought she might be sick. The man turned away from the doors and faced the panel, his hands clasped loosely in front of him like nothing unusual had just happened. Eva tried to steady her breathing, tried to find words, an apology, an explanation, something. But before she could speak, he pressed the button for the 23rd floor without hesitation, then glanced at her with those unreadable dark eyes, and said in a voice like iron wrapped in silk, "You're Eva Lewis." Not a question, a statement. Her name in his mouth like he'd already known it, like he'd been expecting her. She hadn't told him her name. The elevator continued its smooth ascent, the numbers climbing on the digital display above the doors. Eva's pulse thundered in her ears as she stared at the man who had just stepped between her and Paul without a word, without hesitation, without fear. A man who somehow already knew exactly who she was. The elevator climbed in perfect silence, each floor marked by a soft chime that seemed too loud in the confined space. Eva's breathing was the only other sound, ragged, uneven, embarrassingly obvious. She pressed harder against the back wall, her fingers white-knuckled around the brass railing, trying to make herself smaller in a space that suddenly felt far too intimate. The man in the black suit hadn't moved since the doors closed. He stood facing the panel, hands still clasped in front of him, his posture relaxed in a way that felt deliberate, controlled, like standing in an elevator with a panicking woman in an evening gown was something he encountered every Tuesday. Outside, through the crack between the doors, Eva could still hear Paul, muffled now, but unmistakable, his voice raised, angry, demanding someone do something. The concierge's reply was too quiet to make out, but Paul's response carried clearly, "I know she's in there. Stop that elevator." The man beside her didn't react, didn't even glance toward the sound. Eva's heart hammered against her ribs. She should say something, apologize for bursting into his space, for dragging her chaos into his evening, for existing in a way that required him to intervene. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped behind the panic still clawing at her chest. "Floor 12, 13, 14. I'm sorry," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to run." His voice cut through her apology like a blade, smooth and precise. He still didn't turn around. "Or you didn't mean to need to." Eva's breath caught. The question hung in the air between them, sharp and uncomfortable. She didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know if she was supposed to. "Floor 17, 18. He turned then, finally, and the movement was so fluid it seemed choreographed. His dark eyes settled on her with the same assessing quality as before, but closer now, more deliberate. He wasn't looking at her dress or her disheveled hair or the way her hands trembled against the railing. He was looking at her, through her, reading something she didn't know she was showing. "He's done this before," the man said. Not a question this time either. A conclusion. Eva's throat tightened. She wanted to lie, to deflect, to maintain some shred of privacy in front of this stranger who somehow already knew her name. But something about the weight of his gaze, the absolute certainty in his tone, made lying feel pointless. "Yes," she whispered. He nodded once, a small, efficient movement, like she'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. Then he reached into his jacket. Eva's body tensed instinctively and pulled out a phone. Expensive, sleek, the kind of device that probably cost more than her rent. He pressed a button and held it to his ear. Ground floor. Man in a black suit, sandy hair, making a scene near the elevators. His voice was calm, almost bored. "Remove him from the property." Quietly. A pause. Eva could hear a tinny voice responding on the other end, too muffled to make out words. "I don't care what he wants," the man continued, his eyes still on Eva. "He's trespassing. If he resists, call the police. If he complies, escort him to the street and inform him he's no longer welcome at the Belmont Royale." Another pause. "Yes, permanently." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his jacket, all without breaking eye contact. Eva stared at him, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. You can't just, he was a guest at the gala upstairs. He has every right to. No. the man said simply. He doesn't. The elevator chimed. Floor 23. The doors slid open onto a corridor that looked nothing like the lobby, darker, quieter, with thick carpet and walls covered in what looked like original art. The man stepped out, then turned back to look at her, one hand holding the door open. This floor is private, he said. You'll be safe here, while security handles your situation. Eva didn't move. Her legs felt locked in place, her mind still trying to catch up to everything that had happened in the last 3 minutes. I don't understand. Why would you? Your name, he said, cutting through her stammering, is Eva Lewis. You're 28. You run a small event planning consultancy out of an office on 7th Street. Tonight you attended the Street, Catherine's Foundation Gala as a guest of Catherine Morrison, who hired you to coordinate her daughter's wedding last spring. Each fact landed like a stone dropping into still water. Eva's blood turned cold. You left your previous employer 18 months ago, he continued, his tone never changing, never rising. Before that, you lived with a man named Paul Simons for 2 years. You left that relationship 8 months ago. Filed a police report 3 months later when he showed up at your office. Restraining order denied due to insufficient evidence of immediate threat. Eva couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The corridor behind him seemed to tilt, the expensive carpet and soft lighting suddenly oppressive instead of elegant. How do you know that? The question came out, strangled, desperate. How do you know any of that? He stepped fully out of the elevator, letting the doors begin to close, then pressed a button on the outside panel that made them open again. An invitation, or a command. Eva wasn't sure which. I know, he said quietly, because I own this building, and when a man behaves the way yours did in my lobby, I make it my business to know exactly who's involved. The elevator chimed softly, a warning that the doors wanted to close. My name is Cesar Castro, he continued, and you can get out of the elevator now, Eva, or you can go back down and handle your ex-boyfriend yourself. But if you choose the latter, you should know he's still in the lobby, and he's getting louder. As if on cue, a distant shout echoed up the elevator shaft. Paul's voice, furious and demanding, the words unintelligible but the rage unmistakable. Eva looked at the man Cesar Castro standing in the corridor like he had all the time in the world. Like her decision mattered, but her fear didn't. Like he'd already decided what would happen next and was simply waiting for her to catch up. She stepped out of the elevator. The doors closed behind her with a soft, final whisper. The corridor stretched in both directions, silent and plush, the kind of space designed for people who valued privacy more than they valued warmth. Recessed lighting cast soft pools of gold along the dark walls, and the carpet beneath Eva's heels was so thick it swallowed sound completely. Cesar Castro walked ahead of her, his stride measured and unhurried, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Like leading frightened women out of elevators was just another Tuesday evening task. Eva followed because she didn't know what else to do. Her mind was still reeling, trying to piece together how a stranger, a man she'd collided with less than 5 minutes ago, knew the details of her life down to the street address of her office, down to the name of the client who'd invited her tonight. He stopped at a door near the end of the corridor, produced a key card from his jacket, and pushed it open without ceremony. The room beyond was an office, masculine, minimalist, and expensive in the way only truly wealthy people could achieve. A massive desk dominated one side, its surface clear, except for a laptop and a single lamp. Floor-to-ceiling windows took up the opposite wall, offering a view of the city that made Eva's breath catch despite everything else. Cesar gestured toward a leather chair positioned in front of the desk. Sit. It wasn't a request, but it wasn't cruel either, just direct. Eva hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair, grateful to be off her feet. Her legs were shaking, a delayed reaction to the adrenaline finally wearing off. Cesar moved to the windows, his back to her, and pulled out his phone again. This time he put it on speaker before dialing. A crisp male voice answered on the second ring. Mr. Castro. Status, Cesar said. Subject removed from the property without incident. He protested extensively but complied when officers were mentioned. He's been informed of the permanent ban and escorted to the street. 2 of our people are monitoring to ensure he leaves the area. Eva's hands clenched in her lap. Paul was gone, actually gone. The relief was so sudden and overwhelming that tears pricked at her eyes before she could stop them. Good, Cesar said. Send me the lobby footage from the past hour. And pull the security report from... He paused, glancing back at Eva. 3 months ago. Incident involving the same individual. Already queued, sir. Thank you. Cesar ended the call and slipped the phone away. then finally turned to face her fully. In the soft lamplight, his features were sharper than they'd seemed in the elevator's strong jaw, high cheekbones, the kind of face that photographs would call striking rather than handsome. His dark eyes settled on her again with that same unnerving focus. "He came to your office," Caesar said. Not a question. A statement pulled from whatever file he'd clearly accessed about her life. "In September." Eva nodded, not trusting her voice. "You called the police. They took a report, suggested a restraining order." Cesar moved to his desk but didn't sit, just leaned against the edge of it, arms crossed loosely. "The judge denied it. Insufficient evidence of a credible threat. Is that correct?" "How do you—" Eva's voice cracked. She swallowed hard and tried again. "How do you have access to that information? That's not public record. That's not something you can just look up." "No," Cesar agreed. "It's not." He said it so simply, with so little concern, that Eva felt something cold settle in her stomach. This man wasn't some good Samaritan who'd happened to be in the right place at the right time. This was something else. Someone else. "I have access," Caesar continued, his tone never changing, "because I make it my business to know who moves through my properties, especially when they bring violence to my door." "I didn't bring," Eva started, then stopped, because technically she had. She'd run into his elevator, dragged her history into his space, forced him to intervene. "I didn't mean to." "I know." For the first time, something shifted in his expression, not quite sympathy, but acknowledgement. "You were escaping. He was pursuing. The situation was clear." Eva's throat tightened. She wanted to ask why he cared. Why a man who owned luxury hotels and had security teams and knew things about her life he had no business knowing would bother stopping Paul at all. But she was afraid of the answer. "Your ex-boyfriend has a pattern," Cesar said, pushing off the desk and moving to the laptop. He opened it, tapped a few keys, then turned the screen toward her. "This is from tonight. Lobby camera." The footage showed Paul entering the hotel at 8:47 p.m. He looked calm, composed, scanning the space like he was searching for someone. Then at 9:23, the angle shifted, Eva appeared, walking toward the elevators. The moment Paul spotted her, his entire demeanor changed. The calm cracked. He moved fast, purposeful, predatory. Eva watched herself try to walk away. Watched Paul close the distance. Watched his hand clamp down on her arm. "This is assault," Cesar said quietly. "In a public space. With witnesses." "No one helped," Eva whispered, unable to look away from the screen. "No one even stopped. I noticed." There was something cold in Caesar's voice now. Something that made Eva look up sharply. He closed the laptop. "That changes tonight." "What does that mean?" "It means Paul Simons is no longer welcome at this hotel, or any property I own. It means if he attempts to contact you here again, it will be treated as trespassing and handled accordingly." Cesar's eyes met hers, direct and unwavering. "It means you have protection, whether you asked for it or not." Eva's heart hammered in her chest. Protection. The word should have brought comfort. Instead, it brought a different kind of fear, the kind that came from realizing she'd traded one form of danger for something she didn't understand at all. "I don't need protection," she said, even though it was a lie, even though she'd spent 8 months looking over her shoulder, changing her routines, avoiding places Paul might find her. "I need to go home." "You will," Caesar said. "My driver will take you. But first, I need your phone number." Eva blinked. "What?" "Your phone number," he repeated, patient and unmoved. "So I can contact you if the situation escalates." "It won't." "It will." Caesar pulled out his phone, ready to enter the information. Men like Paul don't stop because they're asked nicely. They stop when stopping is the only option left. Eva didn't go home that night thinking she'd hear from Cesar Castro again. She'd given him her number, what choice did she have? And accepted the ride in the sleek black car that had been waiting at the hotel's private exit. The driver hadn't spoken, hadn't asked questions, had simply delivered her to her apartment building in the kind of efficient silence that felt rehearsed, professional. She'd climbed the stairs to her third-floor walk-up, locked the door behind her, and stood in her small kitchen for 20 minutes trying to process what had happened. Paul's face twisted with rage, the elevator doors closing, Caesar's voice saying her name like he'd known it all along. "I own this building." She'd barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made her flinch. Every car door closing on the street below made her heart race. But Paul didn't come. Didn't call. Didn't text. For the first time in 8 months, the silence felt absolute. By morning, she'd almost convinced herself it was over. that Paul had finally been humiliated enough to leave her alone. That Cesar Castro's intervention had been a one-time occurrence, a brief collision of their worlds that would never repeat. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. Eva stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering, her stomach already twisting with dread. Miss Lewis. Cesar's voice, unmistakable even through the phone line. Calm, measured, like calling her at 9 in the morning was perfectly ordinary. Good morning. Eva sank onto her couch, still in her pajamas, her coffee forgotten on the counter. Mr. Castro. Cesar, he corrected. We're past formalities. I think. She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know what protocol existed for speaking to a man who'd compiled a security dossier on her life without permission. I'm calling, Cesar continued when she didn't respond, because there's been a development. Eva's chest tightened. What kind of development? Paul Simons contacted the hotel this morning. He demanded to speak with management about last night's incident. He claimed you attacked him. That security removed him unlawfully. That he's considering legal action. The coffee Eva hadn't drunk threatened to come back up anyway. That's not he grabbed me. You saw the footage. You said it was assault. It was, Cesar said, his tone unchanged. Which is why I forwarded the footage to the police along with a formal complaint. Your ex-boyfriend won't be pursuing legal action, but he will be escalating. Eva pressed her hand against her forehead, trying to breathe through the panic clawing up her throat. What does that mean? It means men like Paul don't accept losing. There was something almost clinical in the way Cesar said it, like he was explaining a simple fact of nature. He was humiliated last night, in public, in front of witnesses. He'll need to reclaim that power, and the easiest target for that is you. So what am I supposed to do? Eva heard her voice crack and hated it. Hide? Move? Pretend my life didn't just get turned inside out? No. The word was firm, final. You accept my offer. Eva went still. What offer? Protection. Real protection. Not a police report that goes nowhere. Not a restraining order a judge won't grant. Actual. Physical safety that doesn't depend on Paul's willingness to comply with rules he doesn't respect. I don't understand what you're... I need a public partner. Cesar's voice cut through her confusion like a blade through silk. Someone to attend events with me. Someone credible, intelligent, presentable. Someone who can help manage the social expectations that come with my position. Eva's mind went blank. You want to hire me? No. I want to offer you an arrangement. You need safety. I need a partner who understands discretion. We can help each other. The words landed heavy and surreal. Eva stood up from the couch, pacing to the window, staring down at the street below where normal people were living normal lives. This is insane. You don't even know me. I know enough. There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt. I know you're intelligent, self-sufficient, capable of navigating high-pressure situations without falling apart. I know you need protection from a man who won't stop until he's forced to stop. And I know... He paused, and for the first time, Eva heard something almost human in his tone. I know what it's like to need safety and have nowhere to find it. Eva closed her eyes. What exactly would this arrangement involve? Public appearances, events, dinners, galas like last night. You'd attend as my partner. In return, you'd have access to my security, my resources, my influence. Paul Simons would learn very quickly that touching you means consequences he can't afford. And what do you get out of this? Eva's voice was barely above a whisper. Besides someone to smile at charity events? Legitimacy. The word was simple, honest. I run businesses that depend on public perception. Having someone like you educated, professional, unthreatening, helps soften certain aspects of my reputation. Certain aspects. Eva's stomach turned. What kind of businesses? The legal kind. There was the faintest hint of amusement in his voice. I own hotels, real estate, security firms. Nothing that should concern you. But the way he said it made her think there was plenty that should concern her. Plenty he wasn't saying. This is a terrible idea, Eva said. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew she was considering it. Because what other choice did she have? Wait for Paul to show up at her office again? At her apartment? Hope that next time someone would actually intervene before it got worse? It's a practical one, Cesar corrected. You stay safe. I get a partner who understands the terms. No confusion, no expectations beyond what's agreed upon. And when Paul moves on, when he finally leaves me alone, then the arrangement ends. Cesar's voice was steady, businesslike. But men like Paul don't move on, Eva. They escalate. And I'd rather you be protected when that happens than reading about it in a police report 3 months from now. Eva stared at her reflection in the window, exhausted, scared, trapped in a life that felt smaller every day Paul stayed in it. I need time to think, she said. You have until tonight. Not cruel, just factual. After that, Paul will have had enough time to plan his next move. And I'd prefer you not face it alone. The line went dead. Eva stood at the window, phone clutched in her hand, and wondered if she'd just been offered salvation or something far more dangerous. Eva spent the day trying to convince herself she had a choice. She made coffee she didn't drink, opened her laptop 3 times and closed it without typing a word, stared at her phone like it might offer answers instead of just more questions. By noon, she'd paced her small apartment so many times she'd memorized every creak in the floorboards. You have until tonight. Caesar's words played on repeat in her mind, calm and absolute. Not a threat, just a fact. By tonight, Paul would have regrouped. By tonight, whatever humiliation he'd felt at the Belmont Royale would have fermented into something uglier, more determined. She knew how this worked. Had lived it for 2 years before she finally escaped. At 2 p.m., her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Paul called your office. Told your assistant he's your fiancé and needs to speak with you urgently about a family emergency. Thought you should know. See. Eva's blood went cold. She immediately called her assistant, Melissa, who answered on the first ring. Oh, thank God, Melissa said, her voice tight with worry. Some guy just called saying he was your fiancé and that your mom was in the hospital, but you told me you weren't seeing anyone and he sounded off. Really pushy. I told him I'd have you call back, but block the number, Eva said, her voice steadier than she felt. If he calls again, don't engage. Just hang up. Eva, what's going on? Are you okay? I'm fine. It's complicated. I'll explain later. She ended the call and stared at her phone, hands trembling. Paul was already escalating, already trying new tactics. And if he'd called her office, what else had he tried? Her landlord? Her clients? Another text came through. He's not going to stop. You know that. See. Eva closed her eyes, pressed her palms against them until she saw stars. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw her phone across the room, wanted to rewind 8 months and make different choices, better choices, choices that didn't lead to standing in her apartment feeling like prey. But she couldn't rewind. She could only move forward. She typed a response before she could talk herself out of it. What do I need to do? The reply came within seconds. Car will pick you up at 6 p.m. Bring an overnight bag. You're staying at the Belmont until we formalize the arrangement. Eva's heart hammered. An overnight bag. The Belmont. This was real. This was actually happening. Why overnight? Because Paul knows where you live. And I don't leave loose ends. The car arrived precisely at 6. The same driver from last night. The same efficient silence. Eva climbed in with a small duffel bag containing toiletries, a change of clothes, and a growing sense that she was making either the best or worst decision of her life. The lobby of the Belmont Royale looked different in early evening. Softer, quieter, the crystal chandeliers glowing warm against the dark wood. Eva followed the driver through a side corridor she hadn't noticed before, then into a private elevator that required a keycard to operate. They ascended to the 23rd floor. Caesar was waiting in the same corridor as last night, dressed in charcoal pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked less severe without the jacket, almost human, though his eyes still held that calculating quality that made Eva feel perpetually assessed. You came, he said. Did I have a choice? Yes. He said it simply, like it was obvious. You always have a choice. You just didn't have a good one. Eva's throat tightened. He was right, and somehow that made it worse. Cesar gestured down the corridor. Your room is this way. We'll discuss terms over dinner. I'm not hungry. You will be. He started walking, clearly expecting her to follow. And we have business to settle. The room he led her to was stunning, a suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, elegant furnishings that looked more like a luxury apartment than a hotel room, and a bathroom with marble everything. Eva set her bag down slowly, hyper-aware of Caesar standing in the doorway watching her take it in. This is too much, she said. It's sufficient. He checked his watch. Dinner is at 7. Dress is business casual. We'll eat in my office. Why your office? Because what we're about to discuss isn't for public consumption. He left before she could ask what that meant. At 7 p.m., Eva knocked on the door to Cesar's office wearing the nicest thing she'd packed, a simple navy dress that felt woefully inadequate for whatever this was. Cesar opened the door himself, and Eva was struck again by how different he seemed in his own space. Still controlled, still watchful, but less like a stranger and more like a man who'd made a calculated decision and was waiting to see if she'd keep up. Dinner was already laid out on a small table near the windows, nothing extravagant, just grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, bread, normal food. It somehow made the situation feel more surreal. "Sit," Cesar said, and this time it felt less like a command and more like an invitation. Eva sat. Cesar poured wine red, expensive-looking, and slid a glass toward her before taking the seat across from her. "Terms," he said without preamble. "You attend events with me. Minimum 3 per month. You stay at the Belmont or other properties I designate when security determines it's necessary. You have full access to my security team. In return, you maintain discretion about my business and your safety arrangements." Eva picked up her wine, if only to have something to do with her hands. "And what if I want to leave? End the arrangement?" "You can." Cesar's gaze was steady. "Anytime. But if you do, the protection ends with it. I won't force you to stay, but I also won't protect you from a distance." "That's not—" Eva stopped herself. It was fair. Brutal, but fair. "What about Paul? What about him? What happens to him?" Cesar took a sip of his wine, considered her over the rim of the glass. "Nothing dramatic, nothing illegal. But he'll understand that touching you carries consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that makes him reconsider his priorities." Cesar set his glass down. "You don't need details. You just need to trust that he'll leave you alone." "I don't know you," Eva said quietly. "How can I trust you?" "You can't." The honesty was jarring. "But you can trust that I keep my agreements, and that I have no interest in letting Paul Simons continue to be a problem." Eva stared at the wine in her glass, watching the light catch in the dark liquid. This was insane. Agreeing to let a stranger, a powerful, dangerous stranger, manage her life because her ex-boyfriend wouldn't let go. But Paul had already called her office, was already escalating, and Cesar was right, she didn't have a good choice. She lifted her glass. To questionable decisions, something almost like amusement flickered across Cesar's face. To practical ones. They drank, and Eva felt the weight of the arrangement settle over her like a contract signed in wine and desperation. 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Eva couldn't quite call normal. She attended events on Cesar's arm, a hospital fundraiser, a real estate investor's dinner, an art gallery opening where champagne flowed and conversations danced around topics no one said directly. She smiled, made small talk with people whose names she forgot immediately, stood beside Cesar while he conducted business in the language of handshakes and careful eye contact. He was always polite, always professional, never touched her beyond what was necessary for appearance, a hand at her lower back, guiding her through a crowd, his palm briefly against hers during introductions. He never asked her personal questions, never pretended this was anything other than what it was, a transaction. And Paul had gone completely silent. No calls, no texts, no appearances at her office. It was like he'd been erased from her life with surgical precision, and Eva didn't know whether to feel relieved or disturbed by how thoroughly Cesar had kept his word. She'd asked once, 4 days into the arrangement, what had happened. Cesar had been reviewing contracts at his desk, hadn't even looked up. Paul Simons accepted a position in Seattle. He starts Monday. He wouldn't just leave, Eva had said. His entire life is here. His entire life was here. Cesar had finally glanced up, his expression neutral. Now it's more practical for him to be elsewhere. Eva hadn't asked again. She told herself it was freedom, that this was what safety looked like when someone with actual power decided to provide it. But late at night, alone in her suite at the Belmont, because Cesar insisted she stay there until Paul was permanently relocated, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd traded one cage for another. A prettier one, certainly. A safer one. But still. Then everything changed on a Tuesday. Eva was working in the hotel's business center, reviewing proposals for an upcoming wedding she was coordinating, when her phone buzzed. Text from Cesar. "Come to my office. Now." No explanation. No context. Just the command. Eva's stomach dropped. In 3 weeks, Cesar had never summoned her urgently, never deviated from the careful schedule they maintained. Something was wrong. She took the elevator to the 23rd floor, her heart hammering against her ribs. When she reached his office, the door was already open. Cesar stood at the windows, his back to her, phone pressed to his ear. His posture was different, tenser, the usual controlled stillness replaced by something coiled and ready. "I don't care what he thinks he's owed," Caesar said into the phone, his voice colder than Eva had ever heard it. "The answer is no. If he pushes further, remind him what happened to the last person who challenged me over territory." He ended the call and turned, his eyes landing on Eva with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Close the door," he said. Eva did, her hands trembling slightly. "What's going on?" Caesar crossed to his desk, pulled up something on his laptop, then turned the screen toward her. Security footage. The Belmont lobby. Timestamp from this morning. The video showed a man entering through the main doors, tall, lean, wearing an expensive suit that somehow looked threatening rather than professional. He approached the front desk, spoke briefly with the receptionist, then pulled out his phone and took a photo. Not of himself, of the lobby, of the layout. "Who is that?" Eva asked. "His name is Dmitry Volkov." Caesar's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "He works for someone I have a complicated history with. And this morning he asked about you." Eva's blood turned to ice. "What?" "By name." Caesar closed the laptop. "He told my front desk he was looking for Eva Lewis. Said he had a delivery for you. When they told him you weren't registered as a guest, he asked if you'd been in recently. Asked who you were here with." Eva's legs felt weak. She gripped the back of the chair in front of Caesar's desk. "Why would someone be looking for me?" "Because you matter to me." Caesar said it plainly, without emotion, but the words hit like a physical blow. "Or rather because you've been seen with me often enough that you're now perceived as leverage." "Leverage." Eva repeated the word, trying to process it. "Leverage for what?" "A territorial dispute. Business that doesn't concern you directly, but..." Caesar stopped, ran a hand through his hair in a gesture that looked almost frustrated. Almost human. "I have rivals, people who would prefer I didn't maintain control over certain aspects of this city's infrastructure. They can't touch me directly, so they look for pressure points, weaknesses. I'm not," Eva's voice cracked. "I'm not your weakness. We barely know each other. This is just an arrangement. They don't know that." Caesar moved around the desk, closing the distance between them until he was standing close enough that Eva could smell his cologne, subtle, expensive, grounding. "They see you at my side. They see me provide protection. They assume attachment. And assumption is enough." Eva's mind raced. This was supposed to be safety, protection from Paul, a simple transaction. Now she was a target for people she'd never met, caught in a game she didn't understand. "What do they want?" she whispered. "To send a message. To test my limits." Caesar's eyes held hers, dark and unreadable. "To see if I'm willing to protect what's mine. I'm not yours." "No." Something flickered in his expression, acknowledgement, maybe, or regret. "But they think you are, which means you're in danger regardless of the truth." Eva pulled away, paced to the windows, stared down at the city sprawling below. 3 weeks ago, her biggest problem was an ex-boyfriend who wouldn't let go. Now she was leverage in a power struggle between men who operated in worlds she'd only ever glimpsed from the outside. "What happens now?" she asked, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "Now I send you somewhere safe, temporarily." Caesar's voice was closer than she expected. She turned to find him standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. "I have a property upstate, private, secure. You'll stay there until I resolve this." "For how long?" "A week. Maybe 2. "And what about my life? My work?" "I have clients, Caesar. Obligations. I'll handle it." He said it with such absolute certainty that Eva almost believed him. "Your clients will be told you're dealing with a family emergency. Your assistant will be compensated for the additional workload. Everything will be managed. You can't just manage my life like..." "I can." Caesar cut through her protest, his voice firm but not cruel. "Because the alternative is you staying here and becoming a target. And I won't allow that." "You won't allow it?" Eva's fear crystallized into anger. "I'm not yours to allow or disallow. I'm not property you get to move around like..." "You're right." The admission stopped her cold. Caesar stepped closer, and for the first time, she saw something raw in his expression, something almost like fear. "You're not mine, but you're under my protection, and that means when someone threatens you to get to me, I respond, not because you belong to me, but because I gave my word to keep you safe." Eva's throat tightened. "This isn't what I signed up for." "I know." Caesar's voice dropped quieter now. "Genuine. And if you want to end the arrangement right now, I'll understand. But if you do, I can't protect you. The threat doesn't disappear just because we terminate our agreement. You'll still be the woman they saw with me. Still be the pressure point they identified. The trap closed around her with perfect, inescapable logic. Stay and be sent away to some hidden property like a piece on a chessboard. Leave and face consequences from people who saw her as nothing more than a tool to hurt someone else. When do I leave? She asked finally, defeated. Tonight. My driver will take you. Eva nodded, unable to trust her voice. She turned toward the door, needing distance, needing air, needing something that felt like choice in a situation where she had none. Eva. She stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, Caesar said quietly. This is my fault. My world. You shouldn't have to pay for it. Eva looked back at him then, standing in his immaculate office with his carefully controlled expression cracking just enough to show the man underneath. A man who wielded power like a weapon but couldn't protect her from the consequences of standing too close. Neither should you, she said, and left before he could respond. The property upstate wasn't what Eva expected. She'd imagined something cold and institutional, a safe house with reinforced doors and security cameras, a place designed for hiding rather than living. Instead, the car had delivered her to a sprawling estate tucked into wooded hills, all stone and glass and carefully manicured grounds. The main house was warm, filled with comfortable furniture and soft lighting. There was a library, a chef who prepared meals she barely touched, staff who moved through the space like ghosts, present but never intrusive. It was beautiful, isolated, and it felt exactly like a cage. Eva had been there for 6 days, and the silence was suffocating. No events to prepare for, no clients calling with last-minute requests, no Caesar materializing with his measured instructions and unreadable eyes. Just endless hours stretching into endless days, filled with nothing but her own thoughts, and the growing realization that she'd become completely dependent on a man she barely knew. She spent mornings walking the grounds, afternoons in the library pretending to read, evenings staring out windows at a landscape that felt foreign despite its beauty. The staff was polite but distant. The security team, 2 men who rotated shifts outside, never spoke to her beyond polite greetings. She was safe. Completely, absolutely safe, and she'd never felt more trapped in her life. On the 7th night, Eva stood at the window of her bedroom because of course they'd given her a bedroom with a view, because even imprisonment came with luxury in Cesar's world, and admitted the truth she'd been avoiding all week. She missed him. Not the safety, not the protection, not the elegant dinners or the way his presence commanded every room he entered. She missed Cesar, the man who never lied to her, who'd laid out the terms of their arrangement with brutal honesty and kept every promise even when it cost him, who'd looked at her in his office with something almost like regret and said this is my fault, like he actually cared that she was paying for his enemy's games. The realization terrified her more than Dmitry Volkov ever could. She'd spent 2 years with Paul learning to recognize manipulation disguised as affection, learning that men who claimed to care were often the most dangerous. That love was just another word for control wrapped in prettier packaging. But Caesar had never claimed to care, had never pretended their arrangement was anything but practical, had given her exactly what he'd promised: safety, resources, protection, without demanding anything beyond her presence at public events. He'd been honest when honesty was the cruelest thing he could offer. And somehow, impossibly, that made her trust him in ways she'd sworn she'd never trust anyone again. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Eva crossed the room slowly, afraid to hope it might be him. They'd barely communicated since she'd arrived, a single text confirming she'd gotten there safely, another 2 days later asking if she needed anything. She'd responded with polite negatives both times, maintaining the distance he seemed to prefer. But this message was longer. Volkov has been dealt with. His employer understands the boundaries now. You can return to the city tomorrow if you'd like, or stay longer if you prefer the quiet. Your choice. See. Eva read it 3 times, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Your choice. She'd had so few of those lately. Every decision in the past month had been made under duress, driven by fear or necessity or the suffocating weight of circumstances she couldn't control. But this felt real. He was giving her an actual choice: trust that the threat had passed and return to the city, or stay here in beautiful isolation until she felt ready. She typed a response before she could overthink it. What happened to him? The reply came quickly. Nothing permanent. Just a clear conversation about consequences. Are you okay? The typing indicator appeared, then disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. Why wouldn't I be? Eva sat on the edge of the bed, staring at those 3 words. Because they were a deflection. Because Caesar was always okay, always controlled, always in command. Because admitting vulnerability would shatter the carefully maintained image of a man who never needed anything from anyone. She knew that strategy, had perfected it herself. Because dealing with threats is exhausting even when you win, she typed. Because you sent me away to protect me and handled it alone. Because you're human, Caesar, even if you don't like admitting it. Several minutes passed with no response. Eva wondered if she'd crossed some invisible line, pushed into territory their arrangement didn't cover. Then her phone rang. His name on the screen. An actual call, she answered, her hand trembling slightly. Hello? I'm fine. His voice was quiet, almost rough. Not the smooth, controlled tone she was used to. The situation is resolved. Volkov's employer won't be a problem again. That's not what I asked. A pause. Eva could hear something in the background. Traffic maybe, or wind. Like he was outside somewhere instead of in his perfectly controlled office. No, Caesar said finally. You asked if I was okay, which is not a question people usually ask me. Maybe they should. Another pause, longer this time. I sent you away because I couldn't guarantee your safety here, because my world is complicated and violent and you shouldn't have to navigate it. But, he stopped, and Eva heard him take a breath. I didn't expect it to be difficult. Eva's throat tightened. Sending me away? Not having you here. The admission came quietly, almost reluctant. I've handled threats before, countless times. But this was different because you were the target, because they used you to get to me, and the thought of something happening to you because of my enemies. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. I'm safe, Eva said softly. You made sure of that. I know. But knowing you're safe, and knowing you're here, are apparently different things. Eva closed her eyes, pressed her hand against her chest where her heart was doing that complicated thing again. This was dangerous. This feeling creeping through her defenses like water finding cracks in a foundation. This want that had nothing to do with safety, and everything to do with the man on the other end of the line who'd just admitted he'd missed her without using those words. I want to come back, she said. You don't have to. The house is yours as long as you need it. I know, but I want to come back anyway. Silence. Then, tomorrow? Tonight. Eva stood up, already mentally packing. Send the car. I'll be ready in 20 minutes. Eva, you said it was safe. You said Volkov was dealt with. Were you lying? No. Then send the car, Caesar. Another pause, then something that almost sounded like relief. It'll be there in 30 minutes. The line went dead. Eva stared at her phone, at the blank screen that had just connected her to a man who'd somehow become more than an arrangement, more than protection, more than the practical solution to a problem she couldn't solve alone. She was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind that had nothing to do with ex-boyfriends or territorial disputes, and everything to do with the way her pulse quickened when she heard his voice. But for the first time in 8 months, maybe longer, Eva didn't want to run from it. She wanted to run toward it instead. The drive back to the city felt longer than Eva remembered, every mile stretching with anticipation she didn't want to name. She sat in the back of the car watching darkness blur past the windows, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. She was going back, by choice, to a man who'd just admitted he'd missed her. The implications terrified her. When the car finally pulled up to the Belmont Royale's private entrance, Eva's heart was hammering so hard she thought the driver might hear it. But he simply opened her door with the same efficient silence as always, handed her bag to a waiting bellhop, and disappeared into the night. The lobby was quiet at this hour just after 11 p.m. The chandeliers dimmed to a soft glow that made everything feel suspended, dreamlike. Eva expected to be escorted to her suite, to wait until morning to see Caesar, to have time to prepare herself for whatever came next. Instead, he was standing near the elevators, still in the same dark suit from earlier, though his jacket was off and his white shirt sleeves were rolled up. He looked tired in a way she'd never seen before, not exhausted, but worn, like the past week had cost him something he didn't usually spend. Their eyes met across the lobby, and Eva forgot how to breathe. He didn't smile, didn't move, just watched her approach with that same assessing intensity, except now she could see something else beneath it, something that looked almost like relief. You came back, he said when she reached him. You asked me to. I gave you a choice. I know. Eva shifted her bag on her shoulder, suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't been even that first night running from Paul. I chose this. Something shifted in Cesar's expression, tension releasing, walls lowering just slightly. He reached for her bag, taking it before she could protest, then pressed the button for the elevator. They rode up in silence, but it felt different than before. Charged. Like the air between them was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. When they reached the 23rd floor, Cesar led her not to her suite, but to his office. The door was already open, light spilling into the corridor. He set her bag down just inside and turned to face her. "I need to tell you what happened," he said. "With Volkov. With his employer. You deserve to know what you were caught in the middle of." Eva nodded, her throat too tight for words. Cesar moved to the windows, his back to her, hands in his pockets. "Dmitry Volkov works for a man named Alexei Petrov. Petrov and I have been negotiating over several properties in the Harbor District buildings I own that he wants for shipping operations. Legal operations," he added, glancing back at her. "Mostly. And he used me as leverage," Eva said quietly. "He tried." Cesar's jaw tightened. Volkov's visit to the hotel was meant as a message, a demonstration that Petrov could reach the people around me if I didn't negotiate on his terms. "What did you do?" "I met with Petrov. Explained that targeting you was the fastest way to ensure he never got what he wanted." Cesar turned fully to face her. "I made it clear that if anything happened to you, anything at all, the consequences wouldn't be professional. They'd be personal." Eva's pulse thundered in her ears. "You threatened him?" "No." Cesar's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "I promised him. There's a difference." "What difference?" "A threat is something you might do. A promise is something you will do." His eyes held hers, dark and absolute. Petrov understood that distinction. Eva should have been horrified, should have recognized the violence implicit in those words, the kind of power that solved problems by making them disappear. But all she felt was safe, protected by someone who didn't make empty gestures or file useless reports or tell her to be reasonable. Someone who simply removed the threat because she mattered to him. "And now?" she asked. "Now Petrov is reconsidering his approach. Volkov has been reassigned to operations that don't involve me or anyone connected to me. The harbor properties are no longer under negotiation. Because you scared him. Because I made the cost of pursuing them higher than their value." Cesar moved closer, stopping just out of reach. "This is what my world looks like, Eva. Problems solved with pressure and consequence. Threats neutralized before they escalate. It's not clean, it's not comfortable, but it works." Eva stared at him. This man who wielded power like a scalpel, precise and controlled and utterly ruthless when necessary. She should run. Should recognize the danger of standing too close to someone who operated in shadows even when everything appeared legitimate. But she'd been running for 8 months. Running from Paul, from fear, from the possibility that she'd never feel safe again. She was tired of running. "Thank you," she said quietly. Cesar's expression shifted surprise. "Maybe." Or confusion. "For what?" "For keeping your promise. For protecting me even when it complicated your business. For..." Eva's voice caught. "For being honest. About all of it. Even the ugly parts. You deserve honesty." He said it simply. Like it was obvious. Like lying had never even occurred to him. Even when it's difficult to hear. Eva took a step closer, closing the distance between them until she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, smell the faint scent of his cologne mixed with exhaustion. "I missed you too," she said. "This week. At your property. I kept telling myself I was just restless, that I'd gotten used to the routine of our arrangement. But that wasn't it." "What was it?" Cesar's voice had gone quiet, careful. "I missed you," Eva's heart hammered. "The way you never sugarcoat things. The way you give me choices even when you could just make decisions for me. The way you step between me and danger without expecting gratitude or anything in return, except my presence at some dinners." Cesar lifted his hand slowly, carefully, like he was afraid she might bolt. His fingers brushed her cheek, gentle in a way that contradicted everything else about him. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said softly. "I know. This was supposed to be practical. Simple. I know. But somewhere between the elevator and tonight, it became something else." His thumb traced along her jaw. "Something I don't know how to categorize." Eva's breath caught. "Maybe we don't categorize it. Maybe we just..." She didn't finish. Cesar closed the remaining distance and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't tentative. It was weeks of restraint breaking, control slipping, walls crumbling under the weight of something neither of them had planned for. Eva's hands found his shirt, gripping the fabric like an anchor, and Cesar's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caesar rested his forehead against hers. This changes things, he said. I know. You'll still be a target. Maybe more so now. I know. And I still can't promise you safety without conditions. Without my world attached to it. Eva pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Then stop promising safety. Just promise you'll be honest. That this, whatever this is, won't be built on manipulation or control or anything that looks like what I escaped from. I promise, Caesar said, and it sounded like a vow. Eva woke the next morning in her own suite, alone but not lonely. She'd left Caesar's office near 2 a.m., both of them reluctant to separate but needing space to process what had shifted between them. He'd walked her to her door, kissed her once more softer this time, like a promise, and told her to sleep. She hadn't slept much, had spent most of the night replaying the feeling of his hands on her waist, his voice saying this changes things, like he was both warning her and hoping she wouldn't run. Now, standing at her window watching morning light break over the city, Eva felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation without dread. Want without fear attached to it. Her phone buzzed. Text from Caesar. Breakfast in my office? We should talk. Eva's stomach flipped. Talk could mean anything. Could mean he'd reconsidered. That last night was a mistake driven by relief and proximity and emotions neither of them usually allowed themselves. That they should return to the arrangement as it was clean, transactional, safe. Give me 20 minutes, she typed back. She dressed carefully, not for an event, just dark jeans and a cream sweater, her hair pulled back simply. If they were going to redefine whatever this was, she wanted to do it as herself, not as the polished version she presented at galas. When she knocked on Caesar's office door, he opened it himself. He'd changed 2 black pants and a dark gray shirt, no jacket. He looked less like the man who commanded hotel empires, and more like someone who'd also spent the night processing impossible feelings. Come in, he said, stepping aside. Breakfast was laid out on the same small table where they'd discussed terms 3 weeks ago. Coffee, pastries, fruit. Normal things that felt surreal given what had happened last night. They sat. Caesar poured coffee with steady hands, but Eva noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was slightly tight. He was nervous, actually nervous. The realization made her own anxiety ease slightly. I didn't plan last night, Caesar said finally, setting down his cup. I don't usually lose control like that. Did you want to? Eva asked quietly. Lose control? His eyes met hers, dark and honest. Yes, for weeks now. But wanting something and acting on it are different things. I thought I could maintain the boundaries. Keep this professional. Why? Because you came to me running from a man who couldn't control himself, who used his feelings as justification for hurting you. I didn't want to be another man who... He stopped, looked away. Who took advantage of a power imbalance. Eva's throat tightened. You think there's a power imbalance? I know there is. Caesar's voice was flat, certain. I own this building. I employ your security. I have resources and connections you don't. The arrangement was supposed to protect you, not trap you in something else. And if I don't feel trapped? Eva leaned forward. If I chose to come back last night because I wanted to, not because I needed protection, then we need new terms. Caesar met her eyes again. Because I won't continue something where you might be staying out of obligation or fear, or because you think leaving would cost you safety. Eva set down her coffee, her heart pounding. What kind of terms? Honest ones. Caesar's expression softened slightly. If this continues, if we continue, it has to be separate from the protection arrangement. You stay safe regardless of what happens between us. That's not negotiable. But anything else, anything personal, that's your choice. Every day. No contracts. No obligations. That's not how you operate, Eva said. You're a man who needs terms and conditions and clear boundaries. I know. Something almost like vulnerability crossed his face. But I'm trying to learn a different way. For you. The words hit Eva like a physical touch. This man who controlled everything, who solved problems with precision and power, was offering to let go of control because she needed him to. I have terms too, she said. Caesar nodded. Tell me. No secrets. If something in your world threatens me, I need to know immediately. Not after you've handled it. Not when you think I can handle hearing it. Immediately. Agreed. And we communicate. Actually communicate. Not just logistics and schedules. If something bothers you, if I do something that crosses a line, you tell me. Don't just decide for me what I can or can't handle. Agreed. Caesar's expression was serious, intent. Anything else? If I want to leave, not the arrangement, Not the protection, but this you let me, without consequences, without making it complicated. Cesar was quiet for a moment, his jaw working. That one's harder. Why? Because I don't know if I can let you go easily now. The honesty in his voice was raw, unguarded. But yes, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. I won't manipulate or pressure or make it difficult. You'll have my word on that. Eva stood, her legs unsteady, and walked to the windows. Below, the city was waking up, traffic building, people starting their days, the ordinary world continuing oblivious to the conversation happening 23 floors above it. I spent 2 years with someone who said he loved me, she said quietly. Who used that love as justification for controlling every aspect of my life? Who made me believe that his jealousy was passion, his manipulation was care? When I finally left, I promised myself I'd never let anyone have that kind of power over me again. She turned to face Cesar, who was watching her with an expression that looked almost like pain. But you're different, Eva continued. You've had power over me since that first night in the elevator. You could have used it 100 different ways, could have demanded more than our arrangement specified, could have made me feel obligated or trapped or grateful in ways that translated to control. But you didn't, because that would make me like him, Cesar said quietly. No. Eva moved back to the table, stood close enough to see the conflict in his eyes. Because you're not like him. Paul couldn't control himself, so he controlled me instead. You control everything except the people who matter to you. You give them choices even when it costs you something. Cesar stood slowly, carefully, like sudden movement might shatter whatever was forming between them. You matter to me, he said. More than is probably wise. More than I planned for. Good. Eva reached for his hand, laced her fingers through his. Because you matter to me too, and I'm tired of pretending this is just an arrangement. What is it then? Eva pulled him closer, until she could feel his breath against her forehead. Something real, something honest, something that scares me but not in the way Paul did, not in the way that makes me want to run. What does it make you want to do? Cesar's voice was barely above a whisper. Stay. Eva tilted her head up, met his eyes. Choose this. Choose you. Every day until it doesn't make sense anymore. Cesar's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek. And if it always makes sense, then I guess we figure out what forever looks like for two people who didn't plan on needing each other. He kissed her then slower than last night, deeper, like he was memorizing the feel of her, like he was making his own promise without words. When they finally pulled apart, Eva rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong beneath his shirt. The elevator, she said suddenly. What about it? That's where this started, where everything changed, where I ran from one kind of danger and found something else entirely. Cesar's arms tightened around her slightly. Are you saying I'm dangerous? Eva smiled against his chest. I'm saying you're the kind of dangerous I choose, the kind that protects instead of destroys, the kind that gives me power instead of taking it away. I like that definition. Me too. They stood there in the morning light, two people who'd collided by accident and stayed by choice, and Eva felt something she'd thought Paul had broken forever. Hope that the future could be different than the past. The charity gala at the Belmont Royale was in full swing by the time Eva and Cesar made their entrance. The same lobby where she'd run from Paul 2 months ago was transformed, flowers everywhere, champagne stations glittering under crystal chandeliers, men in tuxedos and women in evening gowns creating a sea of elegance and wealth. Eva wore midnight blue silk tonight, her hair swept up, her hand resting comfortably in the crook of Cesar's arm. He was devastating in his tuxedo, drawing eyes the moment they entered. But for once Eva didn't feel like she was fading into the background beside him. She felt like she belonged there. Nervous? Cesar murmured, leaning close enough that his breath brushed her ear. No, Eva said, and meant it. Should I be? Paul's name was on the original guest list. Eva's steps didn't falter. Security received word this afternoon that he declined the invitation. Apparently Seattle suits him better than expected. Eva glanced up at Cesar, saw the faint satisfaction in his expression, and smiled. Did you have anything to do with that decision? I may have ensured he understood that returning to this city would be professionally inadvisable. Cesar's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. He won't bother you again. I know. And she did. Paul had become a ghost, something that happened to her rather than something still happening. The fear had faded, replaced by something stronger, the certainty that she didn't have to run anymore. They moved through the crowd, Cesar stopping occasionally to greet business associates while Eva stood beside him, not behind. Not separate, but with him. Partners in the truest sense. Mr. Castro. A woman approached, elegant and sharp-eyed, her smile calculated. I don't believe we've met. Victoria Chen, Pacific Ventures. Miss Chen. Cesar's tone was polite but cool. This is Eva Lewis, my partner. Not girlfriend, not date, partner. The word carried weight, significance that went beyond their personal relationship, into his professional world. Eva felt its impact in the way Victoria Chen's expression shifted, reassessing. Lovely to meet you, Victoria said, extending her hand to Eva. Castro speaks very highly of your event planning work. Perhaps we should discuss my company's annual retreat. I'm looking for someone with your particular expertise. Eva shook her hand, recognizing the test for what it was. I'd be happy to discuss it. My assistant can set up a consultation. They exchanged cards, the interaction smooth and professional. And when Victoria moved on to work the rest of the room, Cesar looked down at Eva with something like pride in his eyes. You didn't need me for that, he said quietly. No, Eva agreed. But it's nice having you here anyway. The evening progressed with the rhythm Eva had grown accustomed to: conversations, introductions, the careful dance of networking that looked effortless but required constant attention. But tonight felt different, lighter, like she was finally comfortable in this world Cesar inhabited instead of just surviving it. Around 10 p.m., Cesar leaned close. Want to escape? Eva raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we leave your own event early? I'm suggesting we've fulfilled our obligations and there's somewhere else I'd rather be. Where? His smile was slight but genuine. You'll see. They slipped away through a side corridor, avoiding the main crowd, until they reached the elevators. The same brass doors where everything had started. Cesar pressed the call button, and Eva felt something full circle about the moment. The doors opened, empty, just like that first night, except everything was different now. They stepped inside together, and as the doors closed, Eva turned to face Cesar. This is where I stopped running, she said. I remember. Cesar's hand came up to trace along her jaw. You looked terrified. I was. Of Paul. Of what would happen if he caught me. Of asking a stranger for help. Eva's fingers found the lapels of his tuxedo jacket. I didn't know the stranger would become the person I trusted most. I didn't plan on that either. Cesar's voice was soft, honest. I planned on keeping distance, maintaining boundaries, protecting you without becoming attached. How'd that work out? Terribly. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. Best failure of my life. Eva smiled, rising up on her toes to close the distance between them. Where are we going? Roof. Cesar kissed her softly. I thought you might like to see the city from somewhere higher than my office. Romantic. I'm trying. Another kiss, deeper this time. Learning as I go. The elevator chimed, doors opening onto a corridor Eva had never seen before. Cesar led her through a door marked, authorized personnel only, and up a narrow staircase that opened onto the roof. The view stole her breath. The entire city spread before them, lights glittering like stars brought down to earth. The sounds of traffic and life muffled by distance. A small area had been set up with outdoor furniture and soft lighting, intimate, private, theirs. You planned this, Eva said. I wanted one place that was just ours. Not an office, not a suite. Somewhere away from everything else. Cesar pulled her close, his arms around her waist. Somewhere I could tell you something without the weight of business or arrangements or obligations. Eva's heart stuttered. Tell me what? Cesar looked at her, really looked at her, with an expression so open it almost hurt to witness. That I love you. That somewhere between the elevator and tonight, protection became something else. That you're not leverage or obligation or transaction. You're the person I want beside me even when there's no reason to pretend. Even when it complicates everything. Eva's eyes burned with tears she didn't try to hide. That's terrifying. I know. And honest. Always. And exactly what I needed to hear. She pulled him down, kissed him with everything she'd been holding back, all the fear and hope and desperate want she'd been too afraid to name. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she whispered against his lips, I love you too, and I'm not running anymore. Good, Cesar said, his forehead against hers. Because I'm not letting you go. They stood there on the roof of the Belmont Royale. Two people who'd found each other in an elevator fleeing different kinds of danger. And Eva felt something settle in her chest. Not the end of fear. Fear would always exist in small ways. learned responses that took time to unlearn. But the end of running, the beginning of choosing to stay even when staying was terrifying. Below them, the city continued its endless rhythm. But up here, 23 floors above where it all started, Eva Lewis stood in the arms of a man who'd promised her honesty and delivered safety and somehow, impossibly, become her home. She wasn't prey anymore, wasn't running, wasn't small. She was choosing. Every day, this man, this life, this beautiful, complicated, honest thing they'd built from chaos and elevators, and the simple courage it took to stop running and stand still instead. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.